Hi, everyone. I'm David Cole, Senior Vice President at Sports Innovation Lab and a founding advisory board member with Blue Chip. And today I'm pleased to be speaking with Pete Giorgio, the global sports practice leader at Deloitte and former student athlete at Amherst College, basketball player. Pete, good to
Yeah.
see you.
Go
Thanks for
Mammoth.
joining us.
Yeah, go Mammoth.
We wanted to really just get an understanding of your career path and your role today.
Oh, I love it. Well, thanks for having me, David. This is great.
Sure.
It's funny. My path in sports was actually somewhat late. I was the founder of my computer club in middle school and high school. I was a Dungeons and Dragons expert. I was, that kid that was in all the advanced math classes and things like that. And I didn't really start playing sports till I was a sophomore in high school. For me, sports was, the original part of the journey that got me out of my shell, right? That taught me to have confidence, that taught me, that I could do more than just Dungeons and Dragons, and that I could, have the confidence to honestly look people in the eye and have these types of conversations originally. And so that was in high school. Went on to Amherst College, like you said before, to play for the basketball team, Division III school, and had a great time. For me, Division III athletics was an opportunity not just to play basketball, but to also get an education and do other things in college besides play sports. And for me, I think that continues to be the gift that Division III athletics kind of gives all of us. Um, and then coming out of there, I was a computer science major, so I did keep a little bit with the computer stuff, even though I had the
Dungeons and Dragons,
basketball
yes.
as well. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I kind of stopped the Dungeons and Dragons, but computers continued. And after I went to college on a ROTC scholarship, so spent 5 years in the United States Air Force as a communications officer coming out of school. And then when I came out of the Air Force, got into the consulting world, first on the technology side with a number of technology firms, but then eventually on the strategy side. And that's kind of where I sit today at Deloitte is on the strategy side of what we do. Strategy, technology, kind of all of those things today.
So I'm going to rewind just a little bit because it was really interesting that you went ROTC and actually went to the Air Force. Speak about that journey.
When you go into the military, especially when you go into military as an officer, I mean, I was a 22-year-old who didn't know much about the way the world worked and was shipped down to Biloxi, Mississippi, and put in charge of a 40-person orderly room, where 80% of the people that work for me were older than me, right? And I just remember that first day, that first staff meeting I had where the chief master sergeant turned to me and said, "All right, Lieutenant, this is your show. What do you want to say?" And being like, okay, what do I,
There you
but
go.
remembering back to, my time as captain of the basketball team, as a member of the team, and realizing pretty quickly, this is, I knew how to do this. This was giving the pep talk. This was getting the team ready. This was building camaraderie. This was understanding, what the strengths and weaknesses were of all my different teammates and figuring out how to maximize those. And so it was a pretty easy way to sort of learn how to take those skills that I developed playing basketball and apply them in this context, in a obviously non-sports context. So for me, it was pretty transformational going into the military, just learning how to do that, learning that level of responsibility, being able to sort of, go harken back to my sports days, but also, learning a new level of leadership that I hadn't been exposed to before.
It's great insight into that transition from college to the armed forces. The next question is, how did being a college athlete really help you in your career success? And I think you touched upon some of that, but if you could elaborate a little bit more specifically within
Yeah.
your career journey leading to your current role at Deloitte.
I still remember actually early in my career running into people who didn't know how to fail, right? Like, and it would be somewhat, for me, seem like a somewhat trivial thing that they'd sort of run up against and didn't work. and it would completely, like pull them apart, right? They didn't know what to do. Whereas I was like, all right, you lost a game, you missed a free throw, you got yelled at by the coach, but you know what? You got to get back in there, right? And so that muscle for me, that muscle of kind of just not taking it too personally, not, still pulling on my competitive instincts and my competitive side, but not letting something like that knock me down. For me, that was one of the biggest things that I took to my career. Another one was just, the power of practice, right? That, you've got to shoot 1,000 free throws a day to actually have a good free throw procession. And you don't do that in a day or a week or a month. You do that over years, right?
Well, it seems like it's parlayed into to quite a run with your global sports practice, and I think it would be interesting just at a high level, like explain what it is you do within the context of Deloitte and the industry, and then your role within a very, very big enterprise.
Yeah. So in general, what Deloitte does in sports is really take all of the I don't know, breathtaking array of Deloitte capabilities and bring it to the business of sport, right? So whether that's helping a sports organization develop a long-term strategy, or building a website and an app, or figuring out the right way to organize the company, or helping facilitate a transaction, whether buying a team or things like that, or building finance systems in the background, or helping think through mergers or divestitures, like, or even think about doing your accounting or your tax work. All of these various capabilities um, that Deloitte has. My job is effectively to get the organization globally to the point where it can bring those services to the standard of care, to the level of service that Deloitte expects us to bring it to sports organizations around the world, whether that be leagues or clubs or the Olympics world or the college sports world or esports. Like, how do we bring all those capabilities to bear? And typically, we're solving the really hard problems for companies. We're not coming in and doing some small little thing over here, a small little thing over here. We're coming into companies that are saying, listen, we need to fundamentally change our relationship with fans. How do we do that? We need to fundamentally change our technology capabilities. We need to fundamentally change how we operate within the particular ecosystem or the group of companies that serve our particular either athlete or fan. That's really what our bread and butter is those big, broad scale changes. And what I do is try and keep it all on track.
That was super helpful, and I think a good illustration of you're being a student athlete wanting to get into the business of sports, and it doesn't mean that you have to work for a team or a league.
Hmm.
And a great example of there are so many different companies that serve the sports industry and
Yeah.
allow you to be in sports but not work for a sports organization. Is that a fair assessment? And
Absolutely. I mean, the number one, when people come to me and say, I want to get into sport, the number one thing I always tell them is you've got to open the aperture.
yeah,
You've got to think broadly about what that means. You've got to be willing to do something, and you got to be willing to not be picky, right? But when you ask a lot of people how they got into sport, they use the term luck typically within the first or second sentence, like so, luck or lucky or something like that. And when you double click on that, when you probe on that a little bit, typically they got lucky, on their 67th interview. And I'm like, is that luck or is that hard work? Right? It's a little
yeah,
bit
it's
of both,
both.
right? And sports is all about A, doing a great job, like really coming in there, digging and trusting, and B, networking, right? Understanding where that next opportunity is, getting to meet folks, connecting with folks. And if you do both of those, you do a good job and you create a great network, the opportunities will come.
Yeah, and a great transition into just some advice to student athletes that are going to be applying for their first job, or former student athletes, alumni
Yeah,
that
yeah,
are in a position where they want a new job.
yeah.
Some advice.
Right. Don't get picky, cast a wide net, get in there, do a good job, network, and you'll get opportunities. The second thing is don't forget where you came from. right? I apply to this day, I apply the skills I learned as an athlete in everything that I do. The other big thing I tell people is do your research, right? If you're going to talk to somebody, if you've got an opportunity don't show up for an interview with a company if you don't know what questions you're going to ask, if you haven't done research on that company and you haven't done research on the person that you're talking to when I'm talking to folks.
Great advice, Pete. Great advice. So here's a fun one to bring it home, I guess, if you will. If you could go back in time, what advice would you give to your younger self?
The biggest thing I I would tell myself you're better than you think you are. Listen to that voice. Tell yourself, why wouldn't they let me do that? Right? They're going to let somebody do that.
Well, Pete, really a pleasure. Thank you so much for sharing your insights as an expert, and hopefully our student athletes will gain a little bit of an advantage in their career journey ahead.
I
Appreciate the
love it.
time.
Thank you, Dave.